feel like I'm the other man in the relationship here.
We are partners, though.
We're partners. We were the first municipality that was going to be the site of the first site, and then Carlsbad was the second site. So we're from Russell Township, and our campaign is called Dump the Dump Now. Dump the Dump. This Dump Too is our partner, and one of the things that we did is when the company, Taggart Miller, decided to go with the second site, is we came alongside the group at Carlsbad to provide them with the expertise that we had. We had been working for about 2 years at that point when they came on board, and so we were able to give them some assistance.
Yes, you did. Lots.
Provide them some background to what we had done and where we saw it going. I'm an engineer, and I don't think there's too many probably engineers in the room, but one of the things that to deal with landfills is that the ministry believes that an engineering solution is possible. And the engineering solution is to use liners, sometimes 2 liners, sometimes using leachate collection systems to try to remove any leachate that might leak through the liners. The fact is, all liners leak. The designers of these liners admit that. The biggest difficulty with liners isn't the fact that they can't make proper materials, it's they can't join them together. So these are big long rolls of high-density polyethylene. They roll out, and then they have to weld them in the field. Not an easy thing to do, and so we're talking about miles and miles and miles of these joints that have to be done in the field. And so eventually, if not right from the initial go, these things already have holes in them and will leak. And as Sue Crellin was saying earlier, is that what we need to do is to rely on the natural protective barriers that are there already to be the last line of defense for preventing groundwater to be polluted or leachate flowing off the site. And so that's something that we looked at early on. We have a science group, and Dr. Joe Wallach, who's a structural geologist, we got together and we went through all the design guidelines that MOE has for landfills, and we critiqued them and wrote to the minister and said, we think you need to revise and have better detailed geological and hydrogeological investigations. And we want you to look at not just on the site, but we want you to look off the site. For some reason, the water doesn't know to stop at the fence line. It just wants to keep going. And so there's no use just looking on the site. You got to look off the site. And the other thing you got to do is look at these fractures, and if there's fractures there, where do they lead? And just think about it. If there was fractured rock and there's water starting to go, how would you ever mitigate against that? How would you put cement there? What would you try to do to stop those areas from leaking? They have wells around the perimeter of the property, and they're going to see some leachate movement on those, but when you got fractures, it's going to move real quickly, and you can't have a hole at every one of those fractures to see how it's going, eh? Anyway, so we got a hold of them and said, look, MOE, you've got to revise your regulations and your design guidelines. And they said no, just like Richard was saying. They said, no, it's quite adequate. These were done in 2010. The best engineers looked at this, and we think that we've got the sort of Cadillac design guidelines for North America, and they refused. We also went to the Environmental Commissioner's office, and initially we didn't think that they really listened to us, but a year later in their annual report, they happened to agree with our request to MOE and disagreed with the minister. And so we were kind of happy with that. They make a report to the Ontario Legislative Assembly. So now it's up to the MPPs to take that and to push for something to be done. Most of their reports and recommendations, very little is ever done. So there's an area there. They've got a group, this Environmental Commissioner's Office, which is sort of like an ombudsman maybe for the environment, but really, I have to say, very little effect based on their recommendations that you see anything done. We were very pleased to sign the SELA petition that Napanee, along with Napanee and Opal, to go against the idea of putting landfills on fractured rock or other hydrogeologically unsuitable locations. And our point is basically that when the engineered liners fail, it's the natural site conditions that will be the last barrier defense against polluting the surface water and surrounding groundwater environments. We live in Eastern Ontario, and those of you that live here know that we have seismic events called earthquakes. And these earthquakes occur along faults. Faults are a type of fracture where there's movement. And these faults called vibrations. And you probably know that there was one in, Val-de-Mont in June 2010, and there were chimneys fell, steeples fell, stuff came off of store shelves and stuff. That was about a 5, magnitude 5. We could probably get a 6 or a 7 in this area. Much stronger shaking. And those shaking can cause two things. They can cause movement underneath of the liner and all the stuff in the liners and all the buildings that are on the site, but also potential liquefaction in the area that Sue was talking about in Carlsbad, where they have this thick lead of clay that's very weak. And so one of the things that we would like to have in their regulations and their guidelines is to look at these faults, to look at movements on these faults, but also to look at what the seismic risk is at those sites. There's nothing in these designs that look at seismic risk. The Geological Survey of Canada has produced for the Ottawa area a seismic hazard map related to terrain type. And this shows that the place where we're talking about on Boundary Road in Carlsbad, that it's probably the highest risk area for seismic movement and potential liquefaction in the Ottawa area. So who's looking at that? Who's taking that into consideration? Doesn't seem to be the MOE. So we're concerned about risk of future seismic events at landfill sites in this region, but all over Ontario. This isn't just Eastern Ontario. There are seismic events in other parts of Ontario as well. We're going to go to Toronto on Thursday to meet the minister. I believe you guys were there before. Is it that? Who?
We were.
You were there. So CARP was there, and then there was another group last week? Or you were last week?
No, we were last week.
You were with the deputy minister? So they're starting to listen to our groups. They're starting to entertain people to come to Queen's Park and talk to them about our concerns. We're going to meet the minister. We're going to meet some of the deputy ministers, and we're going to meet some people from the Ministry of Northern Mines, Northern Affairs and Mines, and also the Natural Resources Group. Because the first site that was proposed for this landfill was at a quarry, just like you have down in Ingersoll. And our concern was that here's a quarry that is a beautiful lake and a great place for the wildlife to come. And we were concerned about it being polluted, and we were concerned about what the implications were in the area around that. The last thing I wanted to say is that it's our impression that when technical comments are sent to the Ministry of the Environment, these comments are basically just passed on to the proponent. The Ministry of the Environment does not review them, does not pass them to other experts in the government review team, because there are other departments that are asked to comment on things like terms of reference and the environmental assessments and things. But these things don't seem to be passed on. That's our impression. And so it looks like if you hire an expert like this Mr. Moore here, and he writes a report and you send it in, it just goes into a black hole there. It's passed on to the proponent. The proponent says, yeah, he's interested in the geology of the site. We're looking at that. There it is in our TOR, chapter 6.1. We're looking at that, and these are, so we're concerned that either they don't have the expertise, or if they do, why aren't they sharing their responses back to us? Why does it seem to be a black hole there? And if they don't have the expertise, why don't they have the expertise? Because we're expecting them to be the regulator and to look after the environment, to protect the environment. And that's why we're going on Thursday. Whether we will get anywhere in sharing our concerns, but at least we have the opportunity to speak to Mr. Bradley, the minister, and to some of the other higher officials. Thank you very much, Dave.